Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Welcome to another Friday. Tony here, and we will get started here very shortly. I am going to be talking about turning your book into a course today. It's a topic that I've not actually fully taught on, but I've touched on it at different times. And I've been thinking about it for a couple weeks, so I figured that this week was the week. Dun dun dun. So anyway, glad to see all of you here, and I'm sure more will be showing up since we just got underway. But I have a lot that I want to cover, and I don't want to keep us super long. So with that said, I am going to go full screen so that we can get into the training. And if you saw my post in the chat, at Lauren's prompting, I reached out to the CEO of Surely AI to see if I could get discount codes, so that those of you who haven't already invested in that AI software, you can do so for less than the current price, which is over $70 a month, if I remember correctly. And so I'll be posting those codes. He gave me one for monthly and one for yearly, but I'll be posting them in Expert Media Community and also in the Expert Media Group Facebook group. So you can watch for those later today. I'll be posting them. I'm not quite sure when, because as soon as I finish here, I'm going to go pick up one of my granddaughters, and we're spending part of the day together. So that'll be fun. So let me go full screen here. Okay. So your book as a course. It always amazes me to have conversations with authors, and they put in the work. They've written the book. They've done all the research, shared all their insights, the stories that complement what they're writing. They made their case to the reader, and all of that is done, right? And so in many cases, authors think that's it until they write their next book, whatever that is. And, I love the book writing process and all that it stands for. I am definitely a bookaholic. I buy probably 8 to 10 a week, most weeks. Although I've kind of slacked this week a little bit, but I got like 15 last week, so I guess all things even out. But in any case, very often we see that as the be-all end-all, and unless you hit a runaway bestseller, and by bestseller I mean like a real bestseller, not like #1 on Amazon for a day bestseller. But I mean like 30,000 plus copies bestseller. It's not really going to provide a solid income for you, other than, if you choose that to open up doors for speaking circuit and all that kind of stuff, maybe a little bit more. But even if you do a speaking circuit, what are you going to do? Just talk about your book with nothing else to sell but your book? And that's really what this all comes down to, is thinking about your book as the starting point, not the ending point, right? It is expanding your knowledge, because chances are likely you didn't pack everything into the book. It would be a ridiculously high page count book. And it would be silly to do that, actually, because it can be overwhelming to the reader and all that kind of stuff, as you well know. And so that, to me, is where we come up with an answer to now what. And the now what, to me, is to create a course or 2 or 10, right? You've probably figured out, and you'll definitely see this as we go through this training, that even a simple book, say 176 pages, so not even a really big book, would not translate well into just one course. It would be too much information. even if you are very selective in what you include in there. But I'm going to give you a process that you can follow, and it's the same process that I use to create all of my courses, pretty much. There's a lot of latitude that you can, kind of pick and choose what works best for you and your message, but there's some huge benefits for creating a course from your book, because all that work that you've put into creating the book easily translates into courses. Like, it's the exact same research and the exact same information that you have to draw upon to create a course. So you've already done all that work, so why not increase your ability to spread your message in a different form, or whatever the case may be? And so in my view, courses are one of the best ways to repurpose that content. So they enable you to continue the conversation with your audience through continued learning. And of course, continued learning is a growing market. It has been for years. The pandemic certainly helped push that even more. I mean, you all are here right now. It's continued learning, right? And so courses really enable you, whether it's a whole full-blown course with multiple modules or a single training like this, it doesn't really matter. It just helps keep that conversation alive with the people who are already following you, already reading your book or whatever. And it helps build an additional level of trust. And so with so many online options now, you can learn and teach just about anything. There's so many platforms. It's really quite amazing. And technology has once again leveled the playing field so that anybody can teach skills and knowledge. Any of us, literally you could create a course today and have it out there. Now, we're not going to have time in this setting to really get into all of the technical aspects of building a course and everything. I mean, that's literally a course within itself, and I've taught on that last year, Course Master Pro. And so a little bit of this is excerpted from that, from a concept perspective. But the opportunity really has been growing for years, and there's no sign of slowing down, especially as technology increases and all of that, and course platforms, your own websites, whatever the case may be, what works best for you. Now, the benefits of turning your book into a course really include different learning modalities. So instead of your audience just being able to read what you have to say, they can see. Now, in this case, you don't see me as a talking head. You're just seeing my screen, my slides, but still it's a different way of learning because you're listening as well, audio. And so you get the benefit of video and audio, or even audio by itself, right? So you're immediately not just creating a video training, you're also creating an audio training that people could take with them. It's also easy to expand on your topic. As I mentioned in the beginning, any good writer knows that you can't pack everything in the kitchen sink into a book. It would just be a mistake. And so you're hitting highlights and maybe going in depth in some of your areas depending on the topic. But whenever you are using bullet points like I am here as a launch pad, because you already know your content, it makes it really easy to just go further. And I believe a lot of people in your audience appreciate that. It also brings a higher perceived value versus just a book or an ebook or a Kindle book or whatever. Now all of a sudden you have video. People realize that creating videos takes more effort, and because of that, it brings with it a higher perceived value. Especially because many in your audience aren't creating videos themselves. And so it just kind of goes a little bit further to help establish you as the expert, which is a big deal. You really want to build that know, like, and trust factor with your audience, and sharing courses can certainly help you do that. They also open up the door to more easily create support content like workbooks, worksheets, checklists, reference guides, and all of that kind of stuff, because you'll find that those types of value adds that people enjoy are natural derivatives from creating bullet point slides, for instance. Now, I found that you can create courses on nearly any topic. And here's some of the courses that I've personally taught on, or some of the topics that I've personally taught on. Public domain, of course, that's what I started my business on. Photography, publishing, graphic design, marketing, video editing, illustration, software demos, genealogy, course creation, right? Creating games, e-com, printables, low content books, success and mindset, arbitrage, which is buy low, sell high, AI, of course, and maps, believe it or not, and a lot more topics. So those are just some of the ones that I covered. And Bob brings up a really good point. He mentions how J. Conrad Levinson initially earned around 35 grand in book sales from his 1984 book, Guerrilla Marketing, and over 10 million teaching and talking about it. Absolutely. Yep. So I've created 195 courses in the last 10 years. And here's a list of them. It's really insane whenever you see them all on a screen. And I did this for as much for my benefit as anybody's. But also 470 single sessions in addition to the 195 courses. So suffice it to say that I have a bit of an understanding of how this works. I do it every day, not every day, but just about every day, and certainly every week. I teach 2 to 3 times a week. So the best strategy that I've found is, especially when it comes to books, is that you create one course module per book chapter, depending on the size of your book and how comfortable you are in expanding on that content from a bullet point perspective. And so it really depends on how comfortable you are talking about your topic, and practice makes better. That's one thing that I've found, is that the more you do this, the better you get at it. I've been teaching online for 15 years this year. And plus, for years, I spoke at church as part of the leadership team and all of that. So I've gotten a lot of practice at talking, and I just apparently have a lot to say. So I talk constantly, except whenever I'm at home. I am usually more quiet when it's just Kristen and I, unless we start talking about, brainstorming new business ideas, or these days the conversation is RVing and stuff. But anyway, so you want to highlight the chapter points that summarize your thoughts, right? I often refer to these as like, the power tips that are contained in the paragraphs, which usually every paragraph in your book has at least one, sometimes more than one. It's the kind of stuff that you want to definitely make sure that the listener to the course absolutely gets, because there's two things that happen, especially whenever you're teaching in this format. You have what's actually on the screen and then what's being said. So the bullet points serve as a launching point, but those are primarily the points that are burned into the watcher's mind, and then everything else is enhanced through the stories that you tell, through the additional information that you provide, and so on. And then basically, as you identify those points or those sentences or whatever that help bring out the message of that chapter, just simply reword them into bullet point form so you can condense them. One thing that you want to pay attention to are things like tense and, whether you're speaking first person or third person, just like how you would in writing a book. You don't want to have some that's first person, some that's third person, and back and forth. It can be confusing without realizing that it's confusing. And then you can also add support ideas like images, graphics, all kinds of stuff like that where it's needed, if it's needed. And then just build out the entire presentation using this method. Now, I typically use a course formula, and most of the courses that I teach follow that formula. I don't sit down with a checklist and say, okay, now how does this go again? It's not like that. And actually, it's somewhat related to the sales writing formula, PAS, problem, agitate, and solve. I use a modified form of that whenever I write my courses. And I'll share the exact formula that I use here in just a little bit. But let me give you an example first of what I'm talking about as far as breaking down a chapter. So here is a screenshot of the first 2 pages of chapter 2 from the book, How to Get What You Want by Orson Swett Martin. Great book, in the public domain. I've loved it for years. And by the way, I don't have this in any slides, but I think it's worth mentioning in passing. You can do this with any book, not just yours, especially if those books are in the public domain. And, there's, 85 million, give or take, that are in the public domain. So really, even if you don't have a book yet and you're thinking there, well, this doesn't really apply to me because I don't have a book yet. Yeah, it absolutely applies to you because, pick a book, any book, right? It works. So here are just the first 2 pages out of chapter 2. I didn't do anything with his summary. He tends to write like a summary to kick off the chapters. His books are very, very well written. He was an extremely well-known New Thought writer back in his day. I love his books. I have most of them. And so what I did was I basically created a bit of a mock layout. Like if I were creating a PowerPoint slide based on just these 2 pages, what would it look like? So I thought I would lead off with, we are human magnets. He mentions that right here at the beginning of the second paragraph. Our mental attraction affects our, and so that I'm drawing from here. Our environment, our associates, our general condition are the result of our mental attraction, right? Our mental attraction affects our environment, associates, friends, and family, and our general condition. And then the next point, our current reality is created by, that is drawn from right here. Your thoughts, your viewpoints, your conception of what your status and position in life will be, your ideal of your future will draw you exactly to that plane like a lodestone. Now, the wording is a little bit awkward. I mean, this book is from the early 1900s, and so the language is a little bit dated, okay? But we can simply skirt around that by saying our current reality is created by our thoughts, our viewpoints, our conception of our status and position in life, our idea of our future. So we would say idea more than ideal. Ideal is probably a better word, but in this case it works. Now, one thing that I want to point out, he here says our environment, our associates, our general condition as an inclusive statement, but here he's speaking directly to you, your thoughts, your viewpoints, your conception. So what I decided to do was just keep it inclusive, which as a teacher makes a lot of sense because I'm not excluded from this. I'm controlled by thoughts and everything just like you are. So I just changed up how it's presented a little bit to make it more inclusive so that I'm included in that process. And then the last point is whatever we focus our mind on, that is what we draw to ourselves. And that comes from this point right here. Focus your mind, your predictions, your expectations on poverty, failure, and wretchedness. Banish ambition, hope, expectation of good things, and give full sway to your mental fear, blah, 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 all the negative crap. and the ego magnet will draw you unerringly to squalid surroundings. So basically, in so many words, from, one of the mantras of New Thought is what you focus on, you attract. That's the point that he's making. And many writers in that time period and even today make that exact same point. And so rather than me focus on all the negatives that he lists here in the book, I just went much broader with it. That whatever we focus our mind on, that is what we draw ourselves to. Now, from a teaching perspective, whenever I'm teaching through this, I can obviously mention, listen, whatever you focus your mind on, or we focus our mind on, that's what we're going to draw to ourselves. So if you focus on poverty and a lack of hope, failure, guess what's going to happen? That's what you're going to draw to yourself. However, if you focus on abundance and happiness and success, that's what you're going to draw to yourself. So see, it gives you the ability to switch back and forth, but we're still communicating the essence of the book, except in bullet point form. It's much cleaner. It's much easier to follow because we're updating language, especially in this case, with it being a public domain book. It's much easier to communicate the essence of the book to our audience rather than, them read a word like lodestone. I mean, I'm a rock and mineral guy, so I know what lodestone is, but, the average person may not. It's not a commonly used word these days. And so it really brings a lot of benefit to us just by going through this process. And then all that I would simply do is just continue through the pages of the book and identify bullet points that make sense. Okay. Now, I follow a formula that I call SSD or SSDD. It works really well for creating both individual modules for a course and entire courses. And I use it in both cases. So typically, it involves a setup and then solve. So, I mentioned about problem, agitate, solve. So set up, a solve, and then demonstrate. So the demonstration is of the solution. And then discussion. And that's where Q&A can come in if you're teaching live, or additional points or testimonials or examples or whatever. It works for nearly any type of course, and because the teaching and training process is different from reading a book, the storytelling process needs to work a little bit differently for courses. There's still storytelling. Essentially, at the core of any kind of course creation, whether you're teaching from a PowerPoint slide like this, or if you're in front of a camera, or you're speaking from the stage, or whatever the case may be, courses really are communicated through storytelling, and there's stories that connect to each of these four areas of this formula. So just to kind of break the formula down a little bit, setup really is the foundation for the training in the module. That's where you establish, here's what we're going to cover. It reiterates your promise, which is the overarching title theme of the course, and the reason why. It presents the problems that you will be solving. And there's always a problem. You may not think that you have a problem in your book, and we're talking nonfiction, by the way. There still is one. Otherwise you wouldn't have written the book. It offers research and statistics. Now, you don't have to necessarily include all of these. Okay, this is a broad list that you can kind of pick and choose a little bit from. It establishes the initial connection with your participants and sets up the rest of the training. And you could consider this module 1 if you want. And then solve. It's the solution that your course offers. It reveals your and your participants' struggle and the solution to the problem that's being solved. And the problem doesn't necessarily have to mean something that's going wrong. The problem may be, I need more information. The problem could be, I'm doing awesome. How can I take it to the next level? So it's not necessarily a problem as in negative. It's a problem as in um, transition, I guess would be a word that you could use. So then you'll want to qualify the solution as the best option, and there may be more than one. Like I'll give you an example for those of you who are in my AI marketing mastery course. If you recall in module 1, I presented 12 different possible solutions, demonstrated 6 of them. But yet in module 2, we primarily looked at, well, I guess we just finished it last night, but we primarily looked at 2 of them, right? So I started at 12, dropped it to 6, and then focused on 2. Okay, so that is part of this solution, is qualifying the solution as the best option. You can make your choice. I mean, perhaps what I demoed as my personal favorite solution, you don't really resonate with, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then expound on the solution. So really dig down into how this can help the viewer in as many ways as possible. So you can offer examples that showcase the end result that they can hope for. It shows proof, right? And then demonstrate. Demonstrate shows the solution in action. You could offer a case study that reveals the process step by step. You could share variations on the theme, meaning that it can be adaptable to various situations, not just one specific one. And you want to be clear on required tools and available options and alternatives if those are part of the process. And you want to make sure that you simplify your processes. Never assume existing knowledge. This is a big mistake that I see a lot of people make. They make an assumption that there is a sufficient amount of underlying knowledge. And so what you consider beginner and say, well, this is beginner knowledge, so I don't really need to share this part. Your viewers may be clueless. They may be beginners. And so never assume existing knowledge at all. And so your goal through this is an easy to follow, predictable, repeatable outcome that delivers the solution impressively. That's a lot of words. Now, I do a lot of demo in my trainings. I demonstrate a lot of software, a lot of methodology, and because I've been doing this a long time, I'm a little bit cavalier about it because I trust my own skills and instincts. So I can do something as a demo with no clue of what I'm going to get and make it work because it's just how it is. And sometimes it doesn't work. You know, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, whatever. But rest assured, however random my demos appear, I always have a base understanding of what's going to happen. Always. That's just good teaching. Okay, so it might be random in the moment. I might use a keyword or something. Oh, let's see what we find by typing this in. And perhaps I've never tried that keyword. If I said I've never done it, I've never done it. I don't just make shit up for the sake of making a point. But I may have run similar keywords. I may have done completely different case studies just to see what would happen. Like, okay, so that didn't work. So what does work? Because I'm after repeatable. I want to make sure that as my students watch me do something, that they can get the same outcome, at least hopefully as much as possible. So that's where experimenting and all of that kind of stuff comes into play beforehand, right? Especially if you're teaching live. Me personally, I kind of like going without a net just because it's exhilarating. I really enjoy it. But some of this, of course, will have to be adapted depending on the topic of your book. You know, while this will work for all books, it may require differences. Like, for instance, if I'm teaching on, you know, how to build a raised bed organic garden, the the processes and how I demonstrate that and everything is going to be different than if I'm teaching you how to create a photo composite illustration in Photoshop. But the underlying methodology is very, very similar. Okay. The last part is to discuss. It's the wrap up for the training. We review the material that's covered, reiterate the solution and benefits of the solution. You address questions and comments. And if you're not teaching live, those can be anticipated questions because there's always questions. You can share additional supplemental content to provide clarity on the points as needed and offer final insights for a logical conclusion. Now, one thing that I'll say, and this just popped into my mind, so it's a good sign that I should share this, is one thing that I do from a teaching perspective, and maybe you do this from a book writing perspective. I just think it's a good best practice, is one of the challenges whenever you're teaching is to keep your viewer engaged. Okay. Now, if they've spent money on the training, chances are likely they're going to be more engaged, especially if they're live, because they have skin in the game. But there's also some simple teaching techniques that you can use that work just as effectively in writing a book as in teaching from slides, or even if you're doing a live camera. So one of those that I like to use a lot is there might be a different name for it, but I call it future casting. And what future casting is touching on something because it makes sense in the context of what you're currently sharing, but referring to it as we're going to get to this in the beginning. And sometimes, depending on the kind of interaction that you're getting from your audience, that can actually help indicate what would make sense for you to touch on. Like, for instance, I could say something like, right now we're currently talking about presenting the content of your book in bullet point form, but this also applies if you're live on camera, if you're doing Zoom calls, if you're speaking from the stage, and we're going to talk about those in just a minute. So that last phrase, we're going to talk about those in just a minute, is a future cast. It lets people know this is where we're heading. Okay, it's kind of like traffic direction a little bit. And it's very beneficial to do that. You can do the same thing in your book, but I found that it can be really helpful to tease that information because it helps keep people engaged. Now, if you tell them that it's coming and you don't deliver, well, then we have a different problem, right? You want to deliver on that promise. And normally, because you've written the slides, from your book or whatever, you should know what's coming. It's your information. And if you're writing from another book, just the process of going through and creating the slides is going to give you some idea of when that's going to come. But see, like for me, for instance, right now, I'm teaching using two screens. So this is the practical technical. I'm teaching using two screens. So the main screen, my computer, is the actual slide presentation. Second screen is the Streamyard interface along with all the slides. So I can see every slide of my presentation and I know what points are coming up next. So that makes it a lot easier for me to anticipate what's coming. And in some cases, you may have an audience member if you're teaching live and they say, hey, well, does this apply to that? And you have it in your slides and you know it. You can say, oh, hey, Marjorie just asked blah, blah, blah. We're going to be covering that in just a minute. Simple, right? I can, Marjorie. Let me back up. So this is the setup. If you want to, y'all want to screenshot this. And then the solve. Demonstrate. And discuss. And I lost y'all for a second here. There you are. All right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are definitely variations on the theme. There's a lot of ways that you can handle this. So like even with the formula that I shared there, don't see it as a rigid structure. Okay. You can adapt it according to who you are as a person, a teacher, writer, whatever works. I've actually taught webinars where I only use the first two. You know, the two S's. So don't see it as a rigid format. Instead, think of it as kind of like a template in chalk, but it's a damn good template. It works really, really well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, 195 courses kind of prove that it works pretty damn well because I followed it in most of those and in the majority of those individual trainings as well. So it definitely works, but again, variations on the theme. So it isn't the only formula that you can use for course creation. There's plenty of others out there. I found that most of the copywriting formulas that exist actually work well for writing webinars as well, but also understand, like if you're creating courses and webinars, there's different types of webinars. You know, like if you're selling something, that's a completely different approach than if you're just hardcore teaching. In this case, we're talking about teaching from your book. So it's definitely going to work better in that case. Now, another thing that plays into it is that whenever I gave the example and mentioned about the process of turning your book into a bullet point presentation slide, I essentially positioned that as a very linear process. Okay, like start with chapter 1 and go through whatever. It doesn't have to be linear. Okay. There's a lot of fun things that you can do in that. And like, for instance, use it to create an overview and then use call out references. I go into this in a lot more detail in my book. Right. So a lot of different ways that you can create a variation on the theme. I primarily teach using presentations just because that's what I enjoy and I'm comfortable with it and it works really well. But the process also works for stage presentations. I've done it, proven it, you know, over and over again. I don't really speak much from the stage these days, and not because of COVID, but just because I haven't in several years. It's not my favorite thing to do. I love meeting people and getting to, you know, hang out with customers and all of that. But, you know, I would rather teach webinars and teach them from all over the country, which I've also done. It could be filmed video training, meaning you're standing in front of the camera doing presentations in a studio, on location, whatever. I've done that as well. It takes a little bit more effort because of the, you know, the edit process works a lot different than teaching webinar style. Zoom trainings can be handled the same way. I'm personally not a fan of Zoom, but the process works the same. And then even social media live trainings you can do, which can be a hybrid of slides and live, which I've done with Facebook Live. I've done complete courses on Facebook Live, just film with my phone. I had other video cameras running as well to capture the information, but the live interaction was straight from my phone. And of course, these days you can do live broadcasts through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Vimeo. The list goes on and on. Discord. There's tons of platforms. So we're not lacking in platforms that we can use to reach social media. Ganti says webinars are the new stage. Probably. Zoom probably is what some would say is the new stage. But again, me personally, it works fine. I think that, I don't know if any of you ever used Google Hangouts back in the day and the video that it had there. I see Zoom as that. Sure, it does what it says that it's going to do. You get to talk to multiple people at the same time and everything. And it's not super expensive, but the quality is crap. And that's why I don't like it. That is the only reason I don't like it, is that Zoom calls are just crap. You know, I want quality. I mean, right now, those of you who are watching from YouTube, you're seeing this in 1280, so standard HD, right? But I'm recording at 5K on my computer. But, you know, HD is good enough, and the quality is pretty decent, all in all. And so that's fine. But whenever you get into like Zoom or even Skype, for that matter, the quality degrades just that much more because the software isn't well written. So, you know, whatever works best for you. I prefer these days using Streamyard. And, you know, I still have GoToWebinar. I'm not planning on getting rid of that because I'm grandfathered into, you know, a great price that I got 8-10 years ago. So I'm not going to give that up. They just have some issues that they need to solve that kept recurring. And so finally I decided to try this instead, Streamyard, which was courtesy of Daniel. He's the one that kind of got me into it because that's what he was using for this training platform. And now I use it for everything. Marjorie asks, would you consider doing a training on how to set up a Streamyard live stream and do a class, and how to do a class like this? Yeah, I could show you how to do that, I think. Actually, yeah, I can, because I had to think, because you have to run 2 instances of Streamyard in order to teach it. And so I had to think for a minute how to do that. But I could teach you guys, do the presentation through this feed, which is connected to Daniel's YouTube channel, and then use the feed that I have connected to my YouTube channel as the demo. So I have access to do 2 different StreamYard accounts. So yeah, I could definitely do it that way. Maybe I'll do that next week. That could be a lot of fun. Lori says many marketers are turning to StreamYard. Yeah, I noticed that. I saw that I don't know if it was the presentation that Jay did last night was through StreamYard or something. I think it confused a lot of people because, you know, I'm teaching a course and I was teaching for Jay's people simultaneously. I've really become that good. You know, I've figured out how to teach courses using bilocation. Teach one topic in one area and one topic in the other area. It's called pre-recorded. That's how to do it. But it's kind of funny. Every time Jay presents one of these things that I've done that's been pre-recorded, I get all of these comments on all the various channels and everything. Hey, I loved your training and all of that. And I'm like, what training? You know, thank you, but oh yeah, that's right. Jay was hosting me, but it was actually a lot of the stuff that Jay and I do together are through license agreements rather than me showing up. So that's kind of cool. That's a bit of an advanced strategy, but anywho, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. to talk about Streamyard. And I'll just make a note in my pad right now. We'll just do that next week. It'd be a nice follow-up to this one. Okay, cool. Any other comments or questions before we wrap this up? I really wasn't sure that we would get through this in under an hour, so I'm happy that we did. Whoa. Kristen's having another good day. Man, we had a great day at the store yesterday. It was impressive. I think we did like $1,800 yesterday in our store, which is a good day for us. And she's at over 400 already today. That's great. All right. So yes, Ganti, I will be sharing those codes a little later. I'll try to get them posted sooner than later. My granddaughter was not feeling well yesterday. She just turned 6. So she wasn't feeling very well yesterday. She wants to come to Poppy's house and play. So I'm going to call to see how she's doing, to see if maybe she can come out and play again. I won't be teaching Coursemaster Pro again live, Jared, but because I just taught it last year. But I am planning to offer it again at a discounted rate very soon. Maybe even this weekend. Because I'm planning on running a Father's Day sale this weekend, but I haven't decided quite yet what I'm going to offer. So keep an eye out. So thank you everyone who enjoyed the training today and are sharing that here. I appreciate it. I would definitely very strongly encourage you to just go through this process with your book. I'm telling you, you're going to make a lot more money off of selling courses than you will selling books. That's just the way it is. You can charge more, a lot more, for sure. People are going to struggle to pay $47 or $97 or $4.97 or whatever for a book, but that's nothing for a course, depending on what you're offering and the size and all of that. Bob says, now that I became a grandfather, I figured out why grandparents and grandchildren get along so well. They have a common enemy. Well, I don't know about that, but I know it definitely had a positive impact on me. I mean, I have 5, and I don't anticipate that changing. Hopefully not anyway. 5 is plenty. But I'll tell you what, it's something special, that's for sure. I mean, I think about the role that my grandparents played with me when I was young. And, there's still fond memories for me all these years later, 50 plus years later. So, anything that I can do to help create that for my grandkiddos, I'm happy to do. Because I tend to be really busy. So it's important to carve out time when I'm able to. All right, folks. Well, thank you all very much for joining me. Enjoy your weekend, Father's Day weekend, and say howdy to your dad if you're communicating, even if he's not around anymore, like mine is not. Still okay to say howdy. But anyway, until we gather together again next Friday at noon, enjoy your weekend and the coming week.